Hello, fellow superheroes. Welcome to another edition of our Super Inspector Training Podcast, where we cast vision, build culture, and sharpen our skills as super team members. Super Inspector and Super Team Services. No cape, just extraordinary service. It's time to get our super on.
All right, so welcome back to our Customer Service Standards podcast for Super Inspector. We're glad that you're with us today. And our previous discussion, if you want to go back and listen to that, was on external communication. And that was posted in October. This one is for November, and we're going to be talking about internal communication. So this is the second in the series. And so today we want to welcome around the table here is Angela Williams, who's the CEO of Super Inspector. And then Blake Williams is president. And then we have Leanne Bexar, who is the operations manager. And then I've got Donnie sitting next to me, who's the field service director. Again, my name's Jeff. And so again, we're glad for you guys to join us today. So let's just talk in big terms again with the definition, Blake. What is internal communication? How's it best defined and understood?
Well, it's just how we communicate with each other inside the organization. You know, when people are surveyed in companies and they're asked what's the biggest problem in the company, everybody always says communication. That's like the default answer. No matter how hard you try to have meetings and communicate and different methods of communication, that seems to always be the answer to what we need to improve most, right? And so we thought we would focus on this. And the main thing that we want to do, we want our communication within the organization to be effective, where everything is getting out to everybody in the organization in an effective way, a timely way. And also we want to make sure that we're treating each other when we talk to each other with respect. And, one of the ideas we have is that we treat each other like you're my best customer and I'm your best customer. Because it's a different way. When your best customer walks through the door, your demeanor changes automatically, right? And we should feel the same way when we're dealing with each other. And that way, the work environment is a more positive place and the communication is received in a better light, right? In a more positive way, in a more effective way.
So sometimes we hear this phrase like it starts at home. Like if you want to be more respectful, whatever different types of values and behaviors in your workplace or in your life, it needs to start at home, right? It can't be one way in your family and something different in public. And so that's kind of what this is too, right? The way we treat one another, bleeds into how we treat our customers.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're having communication problems inside the organization, people are frustrated, that's going to reflect them when they go out and talk to their clients in the work that they do. They're more likely to make mistakes if they're frustrated because of poor communication or communication that's negative.
So we're reading the book, Exceptional Customer Service, Exceptional Profit. And a lot of the discussions that we've had are centered around that book. Are there any basic principles they have in that book about internal communication?
One of the first few pages, it talks about practicing it through the ranks, like you touched on. I mean, as tried as it sounds, practice what we preach, right? Mm-hmm. So practice it at home, practice it in the office, practice it with each other, and then it comes out with our customers. It comes natural.
I was going to say what I listened to yesterday is go 100 times more than you, even though we think we have communicated enough internally, do it 100 more times. Sometimes I know through Joe, they say like 7 to 10 times to hear something to internalize it. But I guess also, a person has to be in the right frame to receive it as well. But even if we think everybody knows the mission statement, we haven't said it enough because everybody doesn't know the mission statement.
Mm-hmm. So also one of the things like in parenting, when you talk about positive, negative statements to your children when you're raising them. So like one negative statement needs to be offset, and there's ranges all the way from 5 to 21. I've always used 7 as a recommendation that it takes 7 positive statements to outweigh one negative statement. And the same thing could be said of the way we treat one another in the company, right? We want to be adding value, positive, and uplifting.
Yeah, I was just thinking of well, you said 7 or 8 times and 50 and 100 times, and you said,
So what kind of numbers?
you said 5 to 25, 5 to 20, and it makes me think of the biblical numbers 7 and 77.
Right. That's why I always went with 7.
Well, I learned a lot when I was teaching. If you give them 2 choices, people remember what you said first and last, right? Not in the middle. Same when you're parenting or would you like to do this or this? You give them the one you want them to choose last.
In my role at the last church I was at, we did a lot of marital counseling. And Gina did. One of the things that we learned, there's a book by Dr. Eggleston. It's called Pink and Blue Sunglasses.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about how, men and women, we communicate differently, we see things differently. So to understand effective communication comes from understanding the person you're talking to. If you don't understand where they're coming from, if you don't understand what their view of the world is, something you say passing could be very offensive to somebody else, even though you didn't mean anything about it. And Dr. Eggleston said, men and women, men wear blue sunglasses and wear blue hearing aids, women pink hearing aids and pink sunglasses. They don't hear and see the things the same as each other. So we have to be aware when we're communicating with people, not to be offended by something that somebody says, just because you took it that way. That's why text messages are so bad, because you can't see the inflection, you can't
Email
understand.
can be the same.
Email can be the same way. So in communication, it's a two-way thing that we have to be sensitive to one another and, their paradigm in the world, how they see and think about things.
Yeah, it's amazing. Sometimes somebody will ask me a question by a text message, and I just give an answer like yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be taken as offensive, right?
Well, that's a good example.
Exclamation point.
That's a good example. I texted a buddy one day, and he gave me a real short answer. So I texted back, and that's not like him. That's not like him. Yeah, I texted back, you all right? Yeah, why? Oh, no, that's not normally how you would answer, a question. You usually go into big detail.
Yeah.
Delta called Katie and I out the other day. She said, do you guys know that you don't put any punctuation? Yes, punctuation in your text messages. Mine are short.
Right.
Yes, no,
Yeah.
That's
So
it.
that's something to think about as we're communicating. All right, so let me paint a scenario and then you guys kind of give some input on how we might make it a better internal scenario. So let's say I'm an inspector. I'm going to inspect a house in the morning. It's a mid-'80s house. I look online on Zillow in the evening. Looks like it's been well upkept. It's freshly painted. All the pictures look great. I'm like, okay, this is going to be good. Then I get there on site and it's musty smelling. Doesn't look anything like the pictures. Immediately I'm thinking, dang, this is going to take me a lot longer than I thought. I go to unlock the back door and there's actually a pool in the backyard that wasn't in any of the pictures, right? And so now I'm like, oh gosh, right? And so then I look at my order, there's nothing on the order about the pool. So I call the office and someone answers, right? And I say, hey, this is Jeff, I'm at my inspection. There's actually a pool at this. Don't know if y'all know that, but am I supposed to inspect this? Can you please check it out? And I hang up. They say they will. And 10 minutes later, I get a text from them that says, no, you don't need to inspect the pool. So, all right. So I've done a better job with that in terms of finding out what I need to do for my client and how I'm going to approach that. But how would that scenario be better in terms of adding value to one another and so forth in that exchange between an inspector and the office?
One of the things I always recommend is that call starts with, hey, I need some help.
Right.
Can you help me? When we go into, I'm at this inspection and there's not a pool, it already starts a negative. It's off on the wrong foot already.
Right, and that kind of goes back to familiarity, breeds contempt, even if it's not intentional. Because we're familiar with the person on the other end of the line, we don't take the time to be polite and our frustration comes out in our conversation, but whether it's them we're frustrated or not, but now when we've hung up, we've frustrated them too. So it's just a matter of being aware that the person on the other end of the line is on my team.
So what's some way, well, how could we have handled that? What would it look like differently? What could be said or done differently?
Well, like she said, I would probably call and say, hey, I'm on location now. There is a pool in the backyard. Would you mind finding out if I need to inspect that because I don't have any?
I might back up one further and say, hey, Phoenix, how are you? Hey,
Right.
here's what I got to this house, and I need some help because it doesn't come.
You know who's good at that? Matt Bryant.
So what does he do that makes him good at it?
He says that.
Check in with the person
Yeah.
first.
So
You
you-
know,
And
and then-
then he says, okay, well, here I am at this house.
Yeah, because you treated
Well,
them.
and I guess, you wouldn't be short with your client
Exactly, or your best customer.
or your
right?
best customer, right? You wouldn't be short with them. So don't be short with the person on the other end of the phone just because you know.
Well, and if I ask it that way, it can be interpreted like you didn't do your job right? Like it's not on this order,
Right.
one way or the other, whether I should have done it or not. But I didn't mean that, but I left it open to be interpreted that way. So establishing a good personal connection from the beginning, being interested in someone's life, because you may ask that question, and they're like, oh, hey, yeah, great to hear from you. Or, I'm just trying to make it through right now. I had a dentist appointment yesterday, kind of mouse hurt, but I'm getting, then you can connect on that.
If you know what they're doing, if you say, hey, how you doing? And they're, I got a really bad headache, or my kid's sick, or there's something negative going on in their life, they can kind of make you pause and think, okay, let's not add to that negativity. Or also to understand that they're stressed out right now, so don't take anything personally that they might say. It's just a matter of it being empathetic and not just making assumptions that somebody's trying to be able to.
Well, and then you said a key word there is assumption. So just what the inspector might automatically assume is that something wrong happened when taking the order, right? That's the automatic assumption. And this is a big problem with everybody. They see something and they automatically assume what could have happened to create this instead of
Well, your
let's
mind
find
starts
out the
creating things.
information, right? And so Angela and I talk about this a lot, right? It's like, let's ask some questions and figure out what happened before we decide that something, that this person did something wrong or that something, So it's about, maybe there's some questions there. Did you take this order? No. Okay. Well, there's no pool on the order and there's a pool here. So if you could help me just figure this out. If they did take the order, did the client mention a pool? Oh, yeah, they did. I forgot to put it on the order. So now they're taking the responsibility for it instead of you throwing the blame.
What's a way that the person in the office could respond then to the inspector after they find out that information?
Yeah, we talked about that with Katie, and just for the team, for the people in the call center to respond with, okay, let me see if I can help. And we discussed that was when you call in with a frustration like that, say, hey, I need your help. Can you help me? And the person on the other end say, sure, I'd be happy to help you. What can I do? Now we've set the tone for the entire conversation.
And I think acknowledging their frustration. Oh my gosh, I see that spot on there. That can be frustrating. Let me dig into this for you. Let me look into that.
That's
for you.
good.
And then when you text back, maybe instead of just, no, you don't need to inspect it. That,
Why?
no, you don't need to inspect it. Yeah, they're hiring someone to look at it because they know it has some problems. It's probably why it wasn't in the photos. And I hope you had a good inspection today. Be safe out there.
Right.
Something like that, So it's just learning where to raise the level to add value to someone's life at each moment.
Well, it has to be an intentional thing.
Well, the 10-minute time frame that you gave seemed like a reasonable time frame, but that's something to take into consideration too. I mean, the person could have easily said, oh, I'm taking an order right now, and he's going to be there for 4 hours, and so when I get around to it, I'll take care of it. Instead of now I'm leaving that person there not knowing, and they're thinking about it for the next 3 hours instead of me immediately getting back. So they could have said, I'm going to get right on this. I should be able to get back with you I will get back with you within 15 minutes. And if you don't, you text back and say, hey, I'm still working on this. Yeah. So now it puts them at ease. When you give somebody a plan, it puts them at ease. When they don't have a plan, it's unknown.
So we've also identified in some of our discussions and in the brochure that we put out together, there's kind of four main principles for A+ superhero customer service. We talked about adding value, anticipating needs, act now, and then assisting one another. And so if we think about those values in that scenario, we have been talking a lot about adding value, right? Stopping and adding value to your teammates' lives, recognizing them, so forth. What's an anticipatory need type of thing we could do in that scenario?
Well, before the inspector even had to ask the client care representative, hey, can you call the agent and find out about this pool? They could have said, you know what, Matt, give me 15 minutes. I'm going to call and find out.
Well, what was missed on the anticipation was anticipating that the inspector is not going to know whether to inspect the pool or not and making it know it there at the beginning. Now, we could be saying in this scenario that we're assuming a mistake was made. But that would be where the anticipation starts. They don't want a pool inspection, there's a pool there, and then just don't put anything on the order. Well, they've got to anticipate that the inspector's going to call and ask. And so by not putting it on the order, not only did they cause some anxiety to the inspector, but now they've taken time out of the day of the person answering the phone, whatever they were doing. But this is like 30 minutes of productivity that we're losing.
And so the other thing too, like you were talking about time frames, like I'll get back to you in 15 minutes. And then you text, so I don't have the answer yet. So being aware of what time it is in an inspector's time frame, it's going to be, it's not as good to text them at 12:15, because what are they doing between 12 and 1?
In the meantime.
They're giving their verbal presentation, right? Now that may be good information for them to know, but they've already engaged the client, right? So my anticipation is that I would try and get that information to share as fast before that 12 o'clock hour, right?
And that could come down to individual preferences. Just take this one step further. So you might, if you knew your clients, this one doesn't want to be called during the inspection and he's waiting on that answer, I better text him. This one wants to be called. This one wants, whatever it is.
Yes, like Donnie said, understanding your audience and knowing some of their preferences.
Or maybe they're thinking, well, from 12 to 1, they're with a client, now I can't bother them.
Right.
So there are other things they may be thinking about.
We discussed that, and I discussed it with the leads to call the buyer's agent and say, what kind of buyer do we have? Is he a first-time buyer? Is he an engineer? Do we have a language barrier? So that you're prepared for effective communication and how to communicate with those people when they come in, because each client needs to be dealt with on the level that they're playing at it on that day. Are they first-time home buyers and they looked at 20 houses and made 10 offers and they're anxious?
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that you need to know for effective communication to the client when you get there.
So one of the other principles in the A+ superhero is act now. So we do want to kind of take it upon ourselves to find a solution, right? So in that scenario, that's what I kind of think of. Like I'm going to take, they called me, I ended up answering the phone, I'm going to take responsibility of seeing this through. Rather than looking at the order and say, well, this was started by so-and-so, it's their responsibility. And then that leads to the last one, which is assist one another. And that's a lot about how we work together, right? So as Katie had said at one point, superheroes know how to use their sidekicks, right? And so we work with one another to find solutions. So how would that play out? So I can imagine a scenario, I'm not saying this happens, but you hang up the phone in the call center and I look and I see who started this. And I go, hey, so-and-so, you started this order. Can you tell me, do they need to inspect the pool or not? I need to let so-and-so know. How would that be? How would we better work together as a team and assisting one another?
Well, I think like Blake said, going back to the notes, if I took that initial order, I should have put those notes, thought about that. So now getting a call back, I don't have to holler at somebody. They might be on a call, they might be in the middle of something and interrupt them. So I think it's that.
And the scenario can push down to other divisions. So like concierge division, they need each other, they use each other to find solutions. Right. So I may be engaged in the text message exchange with the customer. Now they need some further eval and I don't have that person. I need to pass that off. So, hey, Michelle, can you just get this? how can I do that in a way that adds value? And how do we say those things? So that's when we start drilling down to daily activities. How would that standards actually look?
Well, definitely not just hollering at them, hey, looking at them, seeing in the moment, are they on the phone? Are they heads down in the middle reading something, trying to understand where they are in their workload, and then knowing how do they prefer to get that information. If they are on the phone and it is urgent, how do we do that? So it's understanding within your team what their preferences are and how that best comes through.
That can push back a lot to the Actimax thing, right? Everybody should
Absolutely.
review their team's Actimax and know, how would you do that? Angela, you've used Actimax a lot. What's the value of that tool in trying to relate to someone?
So I know upstairs, they each have their how best to communicate with me outside their cubicle.
Oh, that's awesome.
But does everybody in this room in customer care know everybody's in concierge? Then they probably should know the inspectors too, or pest or whoever. So that might be. And one of the questions that I asked yesterday, when we're doing an in-depth interview with somebody, is how do you prefer to communicate? Is it face-to-face? Is it text? Is it email? So maybe we could take that a step further and let everybody know that.
So one of the things we want people to be thinking about across their divisions
Is it might not be the same.
Right.
The way I want to receive information is not the same that Leanne wants to get it. And so just keeping that in mind, as you interrupt or need to talk to somebody.
That's what we're trying to encourage people to do throughout this month of November, is to reflect upon, there's not a lot of perfectly right answers, but there are better practices than others. And so let's stop for a month and think about those. Where are the engagement points? Where are the touch points I have with my team members? And how can I do it better? One aspect of internal communication is kind of how we treat one another in terms of kind of the spiritual, empathetic, value side. Another way is those best practices, like the daily activities of the various forms of media that we use to talk to one another. And trying to think about, all right, what's a good standard for those? So like you were saying, just then texting or phone calls or email.
I think the circumstances should drive the way that you communicate. Yeah, if it's something that's a sensitive subject or something that you need help on, it should probably be more, like a phone call, a personal thing, where inflection of the voice and that type of thing can be read. So if it's something that's going to carry frustration in the conversation, it shouldn't be done through a text or email. So I think selecting the proper mode of communication for whatever the circumstance is important as well.
Their preference, right? You and I had this the other day. You sent me a chat, was it?
A chat.
It was not a text. It was a chat. Hey, can you get a check for? And I was like, hey, Jeff, I'm not at my desk right now. Can you shoot this to me in email? Because I'm afraid I'll forget it.
Right.
I want to provide you with good customer service. In order to do that, I need it in my email so I make sure I don't miss it.
Right.
So it is just working together and being open and honest and letting each other know about our
And
preferences.
understanding.
And if we analyze that scenario just a little bit, it would be, you could have added, I need this check tomorrow afternoon, right? Given a time frame. So she doesn't know if you need it right this second. Do I need to drop everything? Or can I wait till tomorrow? And then she probably would have responded back, great, I'll have it to you by tomorrow morning.
So specific.
Well, and in this situation, we did have that back and forth communication. It was an urgent request.
And that would be the anticipatory.
And in communication, I think transparency is important too. Just an example, I don't remember the exact conversation, but I said something to Gina the other day, and she said something back to me, and I was like, is that what you heard? Those are not the words that came out of my mouth. To make sure that if there's a misunderstanding in communication, that you're transparent. I don't know what you just meant by what I don't know what you meant by what you just said. Can you clarify that? Instead of internalizing it and walking away mad. To be transparent with one another and comfortable enough with one another to question motivations, so that there's no misunderstanding.
There's a lot of different components to these different various media. So like your phone and your message that's on your phone for voicemail, or texting. Like I know when I was inspecting, I didn't have at one point my read texts on. But when I started inspecting, when I turned it on, because I'd get calls from Blake or the office, whatever. If I'm in the attic or on the roof, I might look at it real fast, but I can't type me back. But at least I'm letting you know I read it. You know I saw it.
Right.
And so, that's a little bit of a help in terms of me responding.
My daughter
So it's just
turns it off.
thinking through all those different types of scenario and what's the best. How soon should we expect a team member to respond to a phone call or a text or an email?
Yeah, and Joe brings that up all the time. He does the not prepared with it, 10, 2, and 4s when he returns his phone calls, and that's fine in most cases, but sometimes the answers need now,
Well, and the book takes a different approach when we get further into the exceptional customer service, exceptional profits book. They're like, no matter what level you're at, CEO down to frontline team member, you should answer your phone when it rings, period.
I agree with that.
And so that's a real tough area for some people because they want to manage interruptions. They want to be highly productive and focused on their, that may be another podcast topic, but that and some of the words we use as well, right? And just how you approach people. Like recently I've had some conversations turn negative when it's posed to me, why did you do this? Or why aren't we doing this? And the minute you phrase something and you start with why, my defenses go up.
Right.
I'm just like,
Right.
hey, wait a minute.
You gotta defend it.
Right. It's like, it's accusatory when you say why. Now I feel like I've been accused. And instead of saying, this happened, how do you think that's going to impact whatever, right? So when you're asking a question, what word you use to start that question, who, what, when, where, why, is really important because that dictates how the person might receive it. Now, everybody might not be like me.
So a lot of it is in trying to improve these standards is one, where are those places where we need to pause and think about how am I doing something? And then the second one is how can I improve it? Then beyond that is how do I implement that and create a new behavior in my life, right? That's going to improve the team around me.
Yeah, and then the self-awareness too. Like now I'm turned into a big argument and I went through that. Now I'm trying to be more self-aware because it came up again just a few days after that where the question was, why aren't we doing this? And I immediately went, wait a minute, this has never been discussed. And he accuses me of not doing something. And I had to stop and say, okay, what he's saying is we should be doing this. Or let's talk about doing this. Instead of he's not accusing me of anything.
It was an idea. Why don't we do this? Why aren't we doing that?
Right.
Circled up here and as we move through the month of November and we want our different divisions to be thinking about internal communication, what would be, in terms of the divisions you guys are overseeing, kind of key focus points that you would see as helping your division improve in terms of internal communication? What's one thing you'd like your team members to begin thinking about and discussing? You have anything, Donnie?
One of the things that I've been, I sit right outside of the call center, so I hear the conversation go on in there. And one of the things that I've been talking to leads and their teams on internal communication is the whole thing about if there's something wrong on the order, an inspector runs into a problem when he calls the office, that he needs to remember those people are on his team and that he shouldn't, as soon as the phone answers, just dump on them. That they remember these people are your coworkers, they're on the same team, so let's be kind to one another. And not just take out your frustrations on the person who just happens to be unlucky enough to answer your phone call.
Right, Leanne, what about with operations?
Well, we have a new team member, so right now it's helping them to understand the urgency of certain communications, because that will help them understand how best to serve our internal customers. I don't want to let them, make them feel like they're hanging out there and they don't understand, oh, I should have gotten to that that's priority. So really making certain that they understand that. And then, something, and practicing it with my kids, because, you call them for supper, and I was raised on the first holler, you better show up. Well, a couple weeks ago, I'm hollering, the boys aren't coming, I'm getting mad. And then I read something and it said, well, whatever they're in, it's important to them. Do you like being hollered at for supper? And I thought to myself, well, no, nobody better come. We need to come to the dinner table. So, I went, oh, okay, well, it is kind of rude, I walked back to my kids' room and they got their headphones on and they're in a video game. Of course they couldn't hear me. But in that moment, it was his video game time and he's allowed to do that, whatever. So, hey, Rocco, when you're done with this game, dinner's ready. Okay, so as soon as you can finish this up or hit save, let's go. And that has just changed it completely. So then I think about that with work too, when we walk in people's offices and if their head's down or something, thinking about what they're in is the most important thing they can be working on right now. So just being aware, and because we share offices, I shouldn't just turn around and talk to Nicole, interrupt her. I should wait for that moment and ask, hey, do you have a minute?
That's a beautiful insight. Okay, so we're gonna skip Blake and Angela. Can you think of anything? You have a lot of interaction both with the growth team, maybe call center, or are there things in those two divisions you can?
Well, I was just thinking in general,
Okay.
there's a lot of room for improvement across divisions from
Okay.
one to the other. So I know there's some stuff that just came up recently for customer care to concierge, but it could be the same to handyman. Even within handyman, from home reno to handyman, and they're all, trying to figure out what their communication looks like. They're still trying to figure it out. It's a startup. So they just don't have their process together and they're just working out what works best for them. I mean, gosh, there's so much at your fingertips. What do you use? When do you use it? When I think of this, I think, how can we improve from division to division and help them?
That's a great perspective. You see that because a lot of us just live within our division. And you see how all the puzzle pieces go together. That's important.
What can happen is you have this division over here needs to communicate with another division, and they think about how's the best way to do that, and there's no collaboration. The solution is one-sided.
Right.
And then this division is like, well, this is not working for me. But that comes out in different ways. It comes out as frustration.
Right. I guess maybe because I hear frustrations about, well, I wonder, why didn't the inspector talk to the client about that? Or the client has an issue and the last person to touch that client maybe was somebody from concierge. So they get the blame. Or sometimes it happens where they were the last one to touch it, but they blame super inspector for, I guess I hear frustrations in the background, and so we've got to get them to come together, realize they were all on the same team.
I think what you're suggesting, Blake, is that maybe go to the other team and say, how do you want me to ask? What's the best way I can ask?
Well, let's come up with a solution. Yeah, this is the issue. And the other team might not even be aware that you're having an issue here with that communication. This is our issue. How can we solve this together?
All right, transparency.
And that's why talking about internal communication is so important, because we work on our customer service skills with our external customers, but in order to really understand it, you have to work on your internal.
So this month, we're going to be talking again about internal communication. Encourage everyone to push that down, have those conversations with their teams and across divisions, and share with us maybe some of the solutions that you come up with, either on group text or just, share it with us however you can. And so then the next month of December, what we're going to be talking about is loyalty opportunities. And so as we always said, we want to do right by the customer. Let's think about across November, how do we do right by our team members as well.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you guys for being on today.
Yeah.
You.
Thanks for listening. Super Inspector is committed to providing opportunity and super experiences for our clients, agents, team members, and all we serve. Visit yoursuperinspector.com today, and until next time, be super.